I never imagined my own brother would throw me out of the only home I had left. One night, under the same roof we once shared as children, he looked me in the eye and told me I no longer belonged there. I stood on the street with nothing but a suitcase, humiliated while his family laughed inside. What Jacob didn't realize was that every cruel word pushed me closer to a truth he couldn't control. The house was legally mine. He thought he had won, but I was about to turn his betrayal into the weapon of his downfall. The house still smelled like my mother's cooking, even though she had been gone for years. It carried the faint sweetness of apple pie, the sharp tang of coffee brewed at dawn, and the warm scent of old wood polished every Sunday afternoon. This was the house where my childhood unfolded, the place I had once believed would always anchor me no matter what storms life sent my way. When my parents passed, the lawyer told me in a calm voice that the deed was in my name alone. It was my inheritance, my sanctuary. At least, that's what I thought. The dining room was lit by soft yellow light, the kind that made everything look warmer than it truly was. Jacob sat at the head of the table as though he had always been the patriarch of this family. His wife, Lisa, leaned into him with the smug familiarity of ownership, while their 2 children argued over a plate of mashed potatoes. I filled glasses with water, trying to silence the uneasy feeling in my chest. On the surface, it was a normal family dinner, but I knew better. The conversation meandered through small talk, Jacob laughing louder than necessary, his voice dominating the room. At one point, he reached across the table and patted my hand as though I were a guest. "It's good of you to still join us here, Sarah," he said, his tone dripping with false warmth. "Still join us." The words rang in my head like an insult, though no one else seemed to notice. I excused myself and walked into the living room, needing a moment of air. My eyes caught the framed photograph on the wall, a family portrait taken years ago, back when my parents were alive. There was Jacob in the center, arm around his wife, my parents smiling proudly beside them. And there I was, or rather, I should have been. The photograph had been tampered with. My outline, the space where I once stood, had been cut out. A jagged edge remained where my face had been. Someone had erased me from the family, literally. I stood frozen, bile rising in my throat. "Something wrong, Sarah?" Jacob's voice startled me from behind. He leaned against the doorway, smirking as if he could see the horror in my eyes. I shook my head, unwilling to give him the satisfaction of knowing how much it cut me. The next morning, I discovered that my house key no longer fit the front door. I turned it again and again, the cold metal scraping uselessly against the lock. My pulse quickened. Before panic could consume me, the door swung open and Jacob appeared in the frame. "Oh," he said casually. "I forgot to tell you. I had the locks changed. Just for security, you know, with the kids around." I stared at him, words caught in my throat. "You changed the locks? Without telling me?" He shrugged. "You're overreacting, Sarah. You're always so sensitive. I'm just keeping everyone safe." Gaslighting. That familiar twist of the knife. He wanted me to doubt myself, to believe I was the one being unreasonable. But this was my house, my parents' legacy. My instincts screamed that something was wrong, but his tone was so smooth, so practiced, that for a fleeting second I wondered if maybe I was imagining it. That night, lying awake on the worn mattress in my room, I couldn't shake the image of my cut-out face from the photo. My own family had begun rewriting history without me. The house creaked with the weight of secrets. Every sound, the children's footsteps, Lisa's laughter, Jacob's low voice, felt like a reminder that I was being edged out, pushed to the margins of a home that legally, rightfully, belonged to me. A week later, Jacob brought up finances over breakfast. His words were careful, calculated. "You know, Sarah, keeping up a house like this isn't easy. Property taxes, repairs, it's a lot. Luckily, I've taken the initiative." "What do you mean?" I asked, my spoon clattering into the bowl. He smiled, sipping his coffee with infuriating calm. "I've already submitted paperwork to refinance the house. It'll take the strain off us. Don't worry, it's under control." The air left my lungs. "Refinance? With what collateral?" His grin widened, wolf-like. "The house, of course. The deed's in your name. But as your brother, I figured you'd trust me to handle it. Family helps family, right?" My blood ran cold. He had filed documents in my name without telling me. My parents' gift, my inheritance, was being leveraged without my consent. I tried to steady my voice. "You can't do that. You had no right." Jacob cut me off with a laugh. "Relax, Sarah. You worry too much. Everything I do is for this family. You should be grateful I'm taking responsibility." Grateful. The word echoed bitterly in my head. He had changed the locks, erased me from photographs, twisted my reality, and now he was mortgaging my future as though it were his own. That night, I sat alone in my room, staring at the shadows stretching across the ceiling. My heart hammered in my chest as a question clawed at me. Was I strong enough to fight him? Or would I allow myself to disappear quietly from the story of this house? Outside my door, I heard Jacob's voice, low and commanding, whispering to Lisa. I couldn't make out every word, but I caught fragments. "She won't. Much longer. We'll handle it." The darkness pressed closer, and I knew this was only the beginning. The shift happened quietly at first, subtle enough that I almost convinced myself I was imagining it. Jacob began holding what he called family meetings every Sunday evening. We would gather in the living room, the children fidgeting on the couch, Lisa with her notebook, and Jacob standing at the mantel like a politician addressing his audience. He called it a way to keep the household organized. But I soon realized these gatherings had nothing to do with organization. They were about power. I would sit in the corner chair, watching as Jacob spoke with the ease of someone rehearsed. He handed out chores, set rules, even created a schedule for when the laundry should be done. At first, I tried to participate, offering suggestions, but my words were brushed aside with a smile. "That's not practical, Sarah," Jacob would say, moving on as though I hadn't spoken. Within weeks, I was no longer asked for input at all. It was his counsel, his rules, his stage. The neighbors admired him. Jacob had always had that charm. He knew how to shake hands firmly, how to tell stories that made him seem generous, noble, selfless. At barbecues or block parties, I would overhear them praising him for taking care of his sister by letting me stay in the house. My stomach would twist at the irony. They didn't know the truth, that it was my name on the deed, my inheritance he was exploiting, and Jacob made sure they never would. One evening, after yet another family meeting where I had been left out of every decision, I wandered into the library. The shelves smelled of dust and old leather, my father's presence still lingering there. I ran my hand along the spines, searching for comfort in the books that once grounded me. That's when I saw it. A folded piece of paper sticking out from behind a row of encyclopedias. Curious, I pulled it free. It was half of a legal document. Aged paper, my father's handwriting, and the unmistakable seal of a notary. My breath caught. It was a will, but it had been torn in half. The section I held clearly referred to the house, naming me as the beneficiary. The rest of the document was missing. My hands shook as I tried to imagine who would have torn it, who would have hidden it here. And then I realized I didn't need to imagine. I already knew. That night, Jacob stormed into the kitchen after an argument with Lisa. He was red-faced, slamming cabinets as the children cowered in the hallway. When he finally looked at me, his voice dripped with venom. "This is your fault. You always bring tension into this house." I blinked, stunned. I hadn't even spoken. Yet somehow, I was the scapegoat. From then on, it became a pattern. When the kids misbehaved, it was because I distracted them. When Lisa was upset, it was because I created stress. Even the dog's barking was pinned on me, as if I had trained it to be disobedient. I was no longer just excluded. I was the family's designated villain. The rumors started soon after. At first, I noticed strange glances from cousins at a family gathering. Then, a neighbor asked delicately if I was doing all right mentally. Confused, I pressed for more, and the truth came out in whispers. Jacob was telling people I had inherited not only the house, but also my mother's fragile mind. He suggested I wasn't capable of managing my own life, hinting at breakdowns, instability, delusions. It spread like poison. Invitations stopped coming, friends stopped calling. I was being socially erased, one careful lie at a time. One afternoon, as I sat on the porch, trying to swallow the weight of isolation, my cousin Emily slipped into the seat beside me. She looked around nervously, as though afraid Jacob might appear. Without a word, she pressed a small USB drive into my hand. "I shouldn't be doing this," she whispered, "but you need to see it." "What is it?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Proof. About Jacob." Her eyes darted toward the door. "He's hiding something. I trusted him once, but I can't anymore. Don't tell anyone you got this from me." Before I could respond, she stood and walked away, leaving me clutching the tiny object as though it were a lifeline. My pulse raced. Proof. The word echoed in my head, louder than the crickets chirping in the dusk. Proof of what? Later that night, locked in my room, I slid the USB into my laptop. Folders appeared, filled with spreadsheets, emails, scanned contracts. My stomach dropped as I read line after line. Jacob was drowning in debt, hundreds of thousands tied up in risky investments, cryptocurrency schemes, failed businesses. And worse, some of those debts were under my name. He had forged signatures, used my social security number, tied me to his downfall. I leaned back in the chair, trembling, the room spinning around me. My brother, the man the neighbors praised, the man who pretended to protect me, had been constructing a narrative to destroy me while secretly dragging me into his financial ruin. The half-will in the library, the whispers of mental illness, the USB in my hand. The puzzle pieces began to fit together into a horrifying picture. Jacob wasn't just trying to edge me out of the house. He was trying to erase me completely, legally, socially, financially, so that when the collapse came, it would bury me instead of him. And yet, as the weight of that realization settled on me, a spark ignited deep within. He thought he was untouchable, that his lies were airtight. But now, I had something he didn't know I possessed. A secret weapon. The night it happened, the sky was heavy with clouds, swallowing the moonlight. I returned from a late shift, tired and desperate for rest, only to find my suitcase sitting on the porch like an abandoned pet. Clothes spilled out, rain beginning to dampen them. At first, I thought it was some cruel prank by the kids, but then the front door opened and Jacob stood there with arms crossed, his silhouette framed by the light inside. "You don't live here anymore, Sarah," he said flatly, his voice like a hammer driving the final nail. "What are you talking about? This is my house," I protested, my voice shaking. "Not anymore." He shoved another box into my chest. "Pack what's left and go. You're done here." His words hit harder than the cold night air. Lisa appeared behind him, arms folded, eyes gleaming with satisfaction. The children peeked from the hallway, watching me as though I were some criminal being evicted. Jacob didn't yell. He didn't need to. His calm cruelty was far worse. He tossed the last of my belongings onto the steps and slammed the door in my face. I sat there for hours, numb, the rain soaking my hair, my skin, my dignity. Neighbors' lights flickered as curtains twitched, but no one came out to help. To them, I was already the unstable sister, the problem child. Jacob's lies had done their work well. The next morning, I checked my bank account, hoping to find some stability in numbers. Instead, my screen filled with overdraft notices and transactions I didn't recognize. Panic surged through me. I dug deeper and uncovered what the USB had hinted at: loans, contracts, accounts linked directly to my name. The trail led to blockchain transactions, massive sums funneled into risky digital investments. My heart pounded as I realized the truth. Jacob hadn't just stolen my home. He had shackled me with debts I hadn't agreed to, debts that could destroy me legally and financially. I sat in my car, staring at the rain streaking down the windshield, feeling the weight of finality. My parents' voices echoed in my memory, my mother's gentle encouragement, my father's quiet pride. What would they think if they saw me like this, stripped of everything they had entrusted to me? For the first time, the thought crept in. Maybe Jacob was right. Maybe I wasn't strong enough. Maybe it was easier to disappear. I closed my eyes, surrendering to the crushing silence, when suddenly my phone buzzed in the passenger seat. Startled, I picked it up. A message blinked on the screen from an unknown number. 5 words that jolted me back to life. Check your parents' safe box. I stared at it, breath caught in my throat. My parents' safe? I hadn't touched it since the funeral. Jacob had claimed he took care of it. My hands trembled as I considered whether this was another trap, another manipulation. But something in me stirred, the faint ember of defiance refusing to die out. The bank lobby was nearly empty when I arrived the next day, clutching my ID with clammy hands. The safe deposit attendant led me to the back, her expression neutral, unaware that my entire life might hinge on what was inside. The box slid onto the table with a metallic scrape. For a moment, I hesitated, afraid of what I might, or might not, find. Inside, beneath old letters and faded photographs, was a sealed envelope. My name was written on it in my father's steady hand. Tears blurred my vision as I broke it open. Inside was the full, notarized will, intact and undeniable. It stated in clear, unwavering words, the house was mine, solely and permanently. My parents had chosen me, trusted me, believed in me. The air left my lungs in a sob I couldn't contain. My knees buckled, and I sank into the chair, clutching the document like a lifeline. All this time, Jacob had known. He had hidden this truth, buried it under lies, gaslighting, and manipulation. He had made me question my sanity while sitting on the evidence of my legitimacy. I cried until my body ached, until my throat was raw. The betrayal wasn't just financial or legal. It was existential. My own brother had erased me while holding the proof of my worth in his hands. By the time the tears subsided, a strange clarity washed over me. I was no longer the sister begging for scraps of belonging. I was the rightful heir, the chosen protector of this home. Jacob wanted war? He would have it. I folded the will carefully, slid it back into its envelope, and whispered into the empty room. If he wants a fight, I'll give him one. That night, as I lay in the back seat of my car with the envelope pressed to my chest, a question gnawed at me, one that I couldn't escape. If your own brother tried to destroy you, would you forgive him, or would you burn everything he touched to the ground? The will felt heavy in my hands, not because of its weight, but because of what it represented. It was proof that I hadn't been imagining things, proof that I wasn't crazy, proof that my parents had trusted me. The next morning, I walked into a law office with the envelope clutched tightly under my arm. My lawyer, a middle-aged woman named Karen, listened carefully as I laid everything out: the forged loans, the manipulation, the eviction, and finally the discovery of the will. Karen skimmed the document, her sharp eyes narrowing. "This is valid," she said. "Legally, you are the sole owner of that house. Jacob has no claim, but—" She leaned back in her chair, her fingers steepled. "Be prepared. Men like your brother don't give up easily. If he feels cornered, he may try to turn the tables on you." My chest tightened. "What do you mean?" "He could argue you're mentally unstable. He's already been planting that narrative, hasn't he?" Her words struck me like a slap. All the whispers, the sidelong glances, the questions about my sanity suddenly snapped into focus. Jacob wasn't just trying to steal my home. He was preparing to discredit me completely. I left the office with a new resolve burning in my veins. If Jacob wanted to destroy me, he'd have to fight harder than he ever had before. Still, Karen's warning echoed in my ears, gnawing at me. That night, I returned to the house to retrieve more of my things. The halls were dark and eerily quiet, shadows stretching like claws across the walls. In the living room, I froze. Something tiny glinted from the corner of a shelf. My heart pounded as I reached for it. A small black lens stared back at me. A hidden camera. I searched the room frantically, and soon I found another behind a plant and another tucked near the mantel. My hands shook as I gathered them, dread rising with every discovery. I plugged one into my laptop. The The files that appeared made my blood run cold. There was Jacob sitting at the kitchen table with Lisa. His voice was low, deliberate. "We'll make her look unstable. Get her on camera yelling, crying. If we push her enough, she'll snap. Then we'll have proof she can't handle the house." Lisa's voice followed, calm and complicit. "People already think she's fragile. It won't be hard." I slammed the laptop shut, bile rising in my throat. He hadn't just been whispering lies. He had been orchestrating an entire performance, manufacturing evidence to strip me of everything. My own home had been turned into a stage where I was cast as the villain, but now the script was mine to rewrite. The next week became a blur of action. I copied the recordings onto a separate drive. I organized the documents from the USB, Jacob's debts, his forged contracts, his financial ruin. I carefully preserved the original will, storing it in a secure location. Every piece of evidence became a brick in the fortress I was building, and yet gathering evidence wasn't enough. I needed the world to see the truth. One sleepless night, sitting in the dim glow of my laptop, I created a new online account under a name no one would trace back to me. I began typing out my story: the betrayal, the gaslighting, the eviction, the hidden will, the forged debts, the cameras. Every detail poured from me like a confession I had carried too long. When I posted it, I didn't expect much, but within hours, the comments flooded in. Strangers rallied around me, outraged by what Jacob had done. The post went viral, spreading from Reddit threads to Twitter feeds to TikTok stitches where people dissected my brother's manipulation like an open case file. Someone started a hashtag, Justice for Sarah. By morning, it was trending nationwide. For the first time in years, I felt seen, believed, validated. Jacob's carefully crafted image began to unravel under the weight of thousands of strangers demanding accountability. But I knew this was only the beginning. Online outrage was powerful, but it wouldn't secure my future. I needed something final, something irreversible. I stood at the window of my small apartment, the city lights flickering like distant stars, and thought of my parents. They had entrusted me with the house, believing I would protect it, not just for myself, but for their legacy. Jacob had twisted that legacy into a weapon. Now it was my turn to wield it. I pulled out the documents, the evidence, the will. My hand hovered over the phone as I dialed a number I had kept close for days, the real estate agent who had reached out months ago. My voice was steady as I spoke. "I'm ready to sell the house." As I hung up, a shiver ran down my spine, a mixture of fear and exhilaration. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about justice, about reclaiming what was mine and showing Jacob that the sister he tried to erase was stronger than he ever imagined. And yet, even as resolve hardened inside me, a whisper of doubt lingered. Selling the house meant destroying the one place I had always called home, but maybe that was the point. Jacob thought the house was his fortress. Soon, he'd discover it was my weapon. I closed the laptop, my reflection staring back at me in the dark screen. "It's time," I whispered. The morning I signed the papers, the air felt different, charged, heavy, like a storm waiting to break. Sitting in the office across from the young couple who would soon own the house, I felt a pang of sorrow. This had been my home, my parents' pride, the center of my childhood. But as I signed my name on the contract, that sorrow hardened into resolve. This was no longer a home. It was a battlefield, and I had just chosen to end the war on my terms. The couple smiled warmly, speaking about how excited they were to raise their children there. I forced a smile back, knowing Jacob was still sleeping inside the fortress he believed unshakable. He had no idea that the ground beneath him had already shifted. 3 days later, the knock came. Jacob opened the door, expecting a neighbor or a delivery. Instead, a man in a suit stood with the new owners, holding the official paperwork. "Mr. Jacobs," the agent said politely, "I'm here with the buyers. As of today, this property legally belongs to them." Jacob's face drained of color. His eyes darted to Lisa, who stood behind him, then back to the strangers holding the deed. "This is a mistake," he sputtered. This is my house. The couple exchanged confused glances, the agent remaining firm. I assure you, sir, everything is legal and finalized. For a long moment, silence hung heavy in the doorway. Then Jacob exploded. His voice rose in a furious roar, echoing across the quiet street. He shouted, cursed, his face twisting with rage. When the new owners tried to speak calmly, he shoved the door so hard it rattled on its hinges. Neighbors emerged from their houses, phones raised. Within minutes, Jacob's tantrum was being recorded from half a dozen angles. He hurled threats, pounded his fists against the doorframe, screamed obscenities at the bewildered couple. I watched from across the street, my hood pulled low, my hands trembling, not with fear, but with vindication. This was the moment. Later that evening, the videos flooded TikTok and Twitter. Clips of Jacob shouting, "This is my house," were stitched with captions mocking his delusion. Others pointed out the paperwork held up by the agent in the background, undeniable proof that he had no claim. The video hit millions of views within hours. The comment sections were merciless. Man gaslights his sister, gets evicted on camera. Justice served. Karma doesn't miss. But then came the moment no one expected. In one clip, as Jacob's voice cracked from screaming, he bellowed, "This house was never Sarah's to begin with!" His words hung in the air, even online, like a thunderclap. The micro cliffhanger was set. The world wanted to know, what did he mean? The next day, Jacob scrambled to regain control. He gathered relatives in the backyard, waving a stack of papers like a shield. "This," he declared, "is the real will. Our parents left the house to me. Sarah forged her copy." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. For a moment, I felt the ground tilt beneath me. Had he somehow found another document? I stepped forward, heart pounding, holding the envelope I had guarded like my own heartbeat. "That's not true," I said, my voice louder than I expected. All eyes turned to me. Slowly, deliberately, I unfolded the original will, notarized and intact. "This is the genuine document. It was hidden in our parents' safe. You've been lying to everyone." The silence that followed was deafening. I handed the paper to Karen, my lawyer, who had come with me for this confrontation. She examined it, then turned to the family. "This is authentic. Legally binding. There is no question. Sarah is and always has been the sole heir to the house." Jacob's face twisted as the truth crashed down. The forged will in his hands shook visibly. Someone snatched it from him, scanning the uneven signatures, the mismatched seals. Murmurs turned to accusations. His carefully woven web was unraveling before him. Lisa's eyes widened with horror, realization dawning that her husband's empire had been built on sand. That night, she packed her bags. By morning, she and the children were gone. Jacob stood alone in the driveway, shouting at empty windows. At school, his teenage son faced cruel whispers, taunts of, "Your dad got owned by TikTok." Humiliated, he refused to return. Jacob's downfall spread from his home to every corner of his life. I should have felt triumphant. And part of me did. The girl erased from photographs had finally been restored to her rightful place. But as I stood watching Jacob collapse, another thought gnawed at me. Was this enough? The online world was hungry for blood. Strangers messaged me, urging me to press charges, to destroy him entirely. Don't stop now. Take everything. End him. Their voices echoed my own anger, tempting me to go further. And yet, as I looked at Jacob, wild-eyed, broken, screaming at the sky, I felt the weight of the choice pressing down on me. I had stripped him of his lies, his image, his family. He was already drowning. The question lingered like smoke in the air. Should I let him sink, or should I push him under once and for all? The house was gone, sold and stripped from Jacob's grip, and with it, the weight that had anchored me in chains for years. I signed the final papers, transferred the deed, and stepped into a new life. My new apartment was modest. 2 bedrooms, white walls, a a balcony that overlooked the city lights, but it was mine. For the first time in years, I closed a door and felt peace instead of dread. I unpacked slowly, savoring the silence. Each item I placed on a shelf or table was a declaration. I was free. No more whispered gaslighting, no more locks changed without warning, no more photographs with my image cut out. The ghosts of my parents lingered, but instead of sorrow, I felt their pride. This was the future they had wanted for me, even if I had to crawl through fire to reach it. Online, my story had become something bigger than I ever expected. The videos of Jacob's outburst had been shared millions of times. News outlets covered it, podcasts dissected it, strangers debated every detail. But beyond the spectacle, something real had emerged. People saw me. They believed me. Hashtags like Justice for Sarah and Ashdar Rise from ashes trended for weeks. Messages poured in from strangers telling me I had given them courage to leave toxic families, to stand up for themselves, to fight for their truth. I was no longer invisible. I had become, unintentionally, a symbol. A woman who had been erased but clawed her way back from the void. They called me a phoenix rising from ashes, and for the first time, I felt the title fit. But late one night, as I scrolled through my emails, a new message appeared. The subject line read, "I know something about your parents." My pulse quickened. The body of the message was short, almost cryptic. "There's another secret you need to hear. Meet me. It concerns the house, and why it was truly left to you." I froze, rereading the words. My heart thudded with equal parts fear and curiosity. Just when I thought the story had ended, another thread dangled before me, pulling me toward an unknown truth. Who was this person? What did they know? And why now? For a moment, the peace I had fought so hard for wavered, but then a calm strength washed over me. I was no longer the Sarah who cowered under Jacob's shadow. Secrets no longer terrified me. Whatever this was, I would face it head on. The next morning, I opened my curtains and let the sunlight pour in. I stood tall, breathing in the crisp air, realizing how far I had come. I had been the orphaned daughter, the scapegoated sister, the castaway. Now I was something else entirely, a woman who chose her own path, her own family, her own truth. I joined a support group for survivors of narcissistic abuse, sharing my story not as a victim, but as someone who had survived the fire and built a new life. I made friends who understood me better than blood ever had. We laughed, we cried, we healed together. Slowly, I began weaving a new family, chosen, not inherited. Jacob's life unraveled in parallel. Lisa divorced him, taking the children. His debts surfaced, collectors knocking at his door. He became a pariah in the neighborhood that once admired him, whispered about with pity and disdain. I didn't have to lift a finger. His own lies devoured him. And me? I thrived. I decorated my small apartment with bright colors, plants that bloomed in sunlight, photos with people who truly loved me. For once, I looked at pictures and didn't see myself cut out. I saw myself whole. One evening, sipping tea on my balcony, I thought about the question that had haunted me. Was justice about revenge, or was it about freedom? Looking at the city stretched before me, I knew the answer. True justice wasn't watching Jacob burn. It was walking away from the flames and building a life that didn't need his ashes at all. Still, the email lingered in my inbox, a reminder that the past never stays buried forever. Another secret waited in the shadows, and I would have to decide whether to chase it or leave it be. I closed my eyes and whispered to myself, "Whatever comes, I'm ready." And now I ask you, if it were your brother who tried to destroy you, would you forgive him? Or would you dig until every last secret was unearthed?